Welcome again to Joe Stunner Boxing. I just want to say a few words about Colin Hart, the esteemed boxing journalist who passed away yesterday at the age of 89. This was actually, his 90th year. He didn't quite get to his 90th birthday, but not far off it. And for those of us who are of a certain age, I'm in my late 50s, you kind of grew up in the pre-internet age, reading people like Colin Hart, Jeff Powell, a lot of like Harry Mullen. In the American side, you had Bert Sugar, Nat Fleischer, people like this. But Colin was definitely in that mix. He was an important intrinsic part of anyone who educated themselves on boxing and read an awful lot of magazines, which I did. I mean, I've read hundreds of magazines. I don't think I've missed a copy of Boxing News since I started buying it, whenever it was, early 80s or whatever it was, 40-something years ago. And yeah, I mean, he was a very good writer, and he wrote predominantly for The Sun, which is a newspaper I don't have any time for. I don't like it. It's the polar opposite politically of what I am. But I can't deny I used to buy it sometimes to read Colin's predictions and reviews. And the one that sticks in my mind out of all of them is him predicting that Michael Watson would knock out Nigel Benn in 6 rounds. And at the time, I thought, that's not going to happen. I think Watson had lost a fight in his career. He lost one fight on points. And he was coming in as an underdog. This took place in 1989. It was in a big tent in Finsbury Park. I couldn't go. I wanted to go, but I was in Rome at the time. I'd booked a holiday, went abroad. And at the time, of course, there was no internet. So I was running around for 2 days trying to find an imported copy of The Sun just to read what the result was. And when I did find a copy, this was 2 or 3 days after the fight, it was, sure enough, it was a 6-round knockout for Michael Watson over Nigel Benn. And I couldn't believe it. I thought, this bastard must have a crystal ball, or a pair of them. But yeah, that was the sort of thing that the pre-internet we used to rely on, good journalists. And Colin talked a load of bollocks sometimes, don't get me wrong. They all do. I talk a load of bollocks sometimes. I mean, you cannot be right all of the time. You frequently get things wrong. At the weekend, I thought Sky Nicholson would outclass Tiara Brown, and Tiara Brown won what I think was pretty much a deserved decision. You get things wrong. If we were right all the time, we'd all be living in mansions and driving McLarens, because we'd all be down the bookies putting our life savings on something knowing that we're going to be absolutely right. But when you consider, Colin's age, he's 89 when he passed away. I mean, the internet has only been a predominant part of our lives, everything digitalized for 30 years, not even that. And I know younger people who are in their 20s or teens that I speak to, they can't imagine a world without the internet, without mobile phones, smartphones and all that sort of stuff. But some of us spent decades in that world, and it was very different. But the thing was, if you were a boxing writer, you had to be good. You really had to be good. You had to say profound things. You had to not just be a quote unquote historian with knowledge of the history of boxing, but you had to be able to articulate yourself well. It wasn't just a case of shoving a microphone in a fighter's face and then sticking it on YouTube and calling yourself some sort of video journalist or something. No. You had to know things which were cross-referenced and fact-checked, and you had to articulate yourself in a way that people understood, that was simple and just interested people in what was being said. Now, Colin Hart himself was born in East End of London, and he was from a Jewish background. Some of his heroes were, or two of his heroes were Jack Kidberg and Ted Kid Lewis, 2 Jewish fighters who gave a sort of fistic identity to the Jewish community. In America, Benny Leonard, I think, was a very, very good example. A lot of people at the time, back in the 1920s, was saying Jews can't fight. Some fighters proved them wrong. Kidberg, Kid Lewis, Benny Leonard, they proved that the Jewish community had a good fighting base. And some of Colin's American heroes were African Americans, like Joe Louis, Sugar Ray Robinson, without question. He actually described Sugar Ray Leonard as the best fighter the best boxer he'd ever covered. And when asked about this, I think he was asked to compare him to Mayweather, Leonard. And Colin said that, no, Leonard was better because as great as Mayweather was, and he was a great fighter, defensively he was brilliant, but Leonard had a great defense, but also had a brilliant attack. He was a spiteful, savage attacker, which Mayweather, even in his sort of first career when he was Pretty Boy Floyd, and then he sort of switched to being Money May, he had a bit of spite to him as well as a younger fighter, Mayweather. But Colin was saying, no. The guy who really did master being a spiteful, front-footed, aggressive fighter was Leonard. And, of course, the best example of that is when he was being outboxed. People forget this. He was outboxed by Tommy Hearns in their first fight, which was a 15-rounder. And he came back to stop Hearns. Of course, it's worth mentioning that if that was a 12-round fight, Hearns would have won. But it was a 15-round fight. And Leonard, with his eyes swelling, and D'Angelo Dundee famously saying, "You're blowing it, kid, you're blowing it," went out there and stopped Tommy. And that was an enormous achievement, So Colin knew his stuff. And he was from an era where, the man was basically a walking encyclopedia. And I couldn't even begin to estimate how many of his articles I've read. But it's sad to see him go. It is sad to see him go because he was a terrific journalist, and again got things wrong sometimes. I think what someone in the comments section of one of my videos said that Colin once stated that Lennox Lewis wasn't a puncher. What can I say? Sometimes you get things wrong. Lennox could hit hard. So, but, this is it's a silly thing to say now, but at the time. When you think about Lewis, before he got with Emmanuel Stewart, he wasn't really considered a one-punch hitter. Again, he matured and the spike came in later on. But I miss journalism. I miss the old-school journalists. I really do. And I think that's why I still buy Boxing News. Boxing News, the trade paper, which is, it's been going since 1909. And they still have good journalists like Mark Butcher. And if you look at a lot of the journalists that now write for online outlets, Tris Dixon is a good example. He's a former editor of Boxing News. They cut their teeth in proper journalism, meaning Boxing News. And this is why the Ring magazine, which has been resurrected by Turki Al-Sheikh, I hope it won't just be a platform for promoting fights. I want to see some proper journalism in that magazine. I'd like to buy a hard copy. I haven't seen a hard copy in Britain. You can import it and it ends up costing like 14 or 15 quid an issue. So no, that's too much. But if they ever produce a copy in England, I'd like to read it, because I remember the Ring the first time round, from 30, 40 years ago, and the journalism was absolutely terrific. Really, really good. So, just a few thoughts on Colin Hart. I do miss the old school way of doing things, but I guess that's a generational thing. Let me know your comments below. What you think. Do you remember Colin Hart? What do you think of him? And, just let us know your thoughts, your memories. And thank you for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel if you're new, because you're helping us out a lot. All right, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Bye for now.